negotiated my fee with the seller. It was awesome to do that and not have to worry about the buyer's agent and how that was going to affect my compensation. In fact, it gave me permission to argue for what I wanted. And I will tell you what, as this new freedom I have about this, I'm getting paid more as a listing agent because I'm not focused on what the buyer's agent's going to make. That's kind of up to the buyer's agent.
All right, folks, we are back. Welcome here to the show. I got a really interesting guest for you today. This is Jesse Moore, the principal at the Pickett Street Properties team out of Seattle, Washington. And Jesse, I've gotten here for a few different reasons, right? Number one, Jesse's one of the most, smartest, most thoughtful, successful agents that I've known because I used to work in Seattle for a long time. Jesse literally sold one of my houses for me. So I not only think he's a smart guy, I literally hired him to be my real estate agent, when I moved out of Seattle. So there's that. And another thing, Jesse is in Washington State. And for folks that don't know about Washington State, they have been consistently ahead of the curve when it comes to a lot of the changes that we're seeing that are going to become national with this recent NAR settlement, okay? So people freaking out about sellers being able to offer zero commission to buyer's agents, that's been Washington State the last 18 months. People are freaking out about, buyer agency agreements being required. Washington State's already there, right? They implemented it this year. So Washington State has been ahead of the curve in a lot of these different changes. And credit to them, credit to the Northwest MLS. But we're here to talk about how is this shaking out? What should we expect? And what's Jesse, thinking about where things are going forward. But Jesse, for people that might not know you, give us a little bit of intro. How'd you get into real estate, and what does your business look like right now? Go for it.
So I got licensed in 2005, and I built a team around 2000, like a real actual functioning team around 2011. And I've sold over 1,000 homes in my career. I've had every level of team from solo up to about 9 members, and experienced all different market types. And that's what I tell anyone that calls and asks why they should hire me to sell their home is roughly that in a nutshell. So, but just like everybody else, I'm trying to figure out how to stay relevant and stay on top of all these changes. So
yeah,
and thankfully I'm still doing this full time. So
yeah, it's been a dizzying few months, right? It's been interesting. As a vendor, as an observer of the market, I'm seeing a lot of anxiety from agents. I'm seeing a lot of concern, especially from the buyer's agents, right? Because they feel that these changes that are coming down the pipe are really going to impact them. But I think it impacts both buyers and sellers, right? I think it's as an agent, you got to be ready to have a conversation kind of with both, right? Because both can make decisions that, in my opinion, can either hurt or harm them, right? They can make different decisions they couldn't make before. But that's my rampant speculation, Jesse. What have you seen in Washington, in Seattle, right? What have you seen change, or maybe not change, over the last 18 months as you guys have kind of been at the forefront of some of these changes? What do you think?
I didn't, this didn't really even hit my radar that much because we've had a buyer's agency agreement in place since 2009, I think.
Wow.
We literally, and when we've done hundreds of transactions per year, and we've had hundreds of buyer's agency agreements signed in a year. And so if you have a high level sales organization, you don't operate without some level of commitment. And so if you set up your business that way to be like a high functioning machine, then you want to make sure that it continues to operate properly and that you don't have something gumming up the works. And so if you don't have a commitment, that means you don't have shared expectations. Not having shared expectations means you're not going to hit your goal. So why would I function that way? So
100%.
Buyer agency agreements, I've always been good about setting expectations because then I have an opportunity to meet or exceed them. And so, and that's the script that we say is, hey, we really just want a chance to hear what your expectations are, because how else would we know how to meet or exceed those? And the other thing is that, it used to be homes were cheaper, cash money was cheaper, things were easier. And people might, if they didn't like where they lived, they might move. They might buy something else. And that's not where we're at right now, And so because of that, a lot of buyers haven't bought a house in 7, 10, 12 plus years. And if that's the case, the world has changed enough that they don't know what this is supposed to be like either. And they're expecting you to tell them how it's going to go. And so, one thing I'm big on saying is that I hope that we are the change we want to see in the industry. Otherwise, people are going to change it for us. And this is an example of that. We should have had buyer's agency agreements from the beginning, because it forces the conversation. You have to be able to talk about commission. You have to be able to talk about your value. And if you weren't having those conversations and now you're scared because you have to, sorry that you now have to do something you should have been doing from the beginning.
Yeah, 100%. I remember, when I was a kind of a early agent, 2012, 2013 timeframe, I would talk to you and talk to members of your team, because I had a buyer agency agreement right from the start. But it was a very, loose, just a bare bones, bare minimum. I wrote it myself. It wasn't like a state form or anything like that. And it didn't touch on a really, touchy topic, which was how much I expected to be paid and what would happen if the seller offered something different, right? Which I remember you guys had that from day one. You guys had that from day one. You say, hey, we expect to be paid this much. And if for whatever reason, the property we find you that you love is not offering that, then you're going to come in for the difference. Is that cool? Great. And I was like, I'll be the anxious agent in this scenario. I was like, yeah, but why would you want to have that conversation with someone, right? Like, why don't we just avoid that? Let's not even talk about that. I'll just take whatever the seller's offering. Sellers always offer something, right? So that was my excuse. That was my rationale, back in 2012. But you guys didn't do that, right? So walk me through why, what? Because right now it seems like a great decision, Jesse. Like, this is amazing. 10 years later. But 10 years ago, it was like, it might have seemed unnecessary, right? What if someone says no? What if they don't want to do that? What if they don't want to pay that much? How did you guys come to that? How did you guys clamp down so hard on that agreement, on that commitment? And what have you, how do you handle those objections? People that object to the commission? Go for it.
Well, I think the answer is twofold. One is I followed the models. Gary Keller created some models that I followed, and I trusted that, and it worked, and it was effective. The other part is my personality. Like, me, I've had a buyer's agent since 2010. So I haven't represented a buyer. I have a few, right? But really in 14 years, almost 15 years. And so I know my personality. I know what I'm good at. I know what I'm not good at. And I'm not long suffering when it comes to patience, and when it comes to, not fools, but, foolish questions or just uneducated questions. And I wasn't the right personality fit to be in that position. Now, so I found people that were better at that. And then I gave them structure. And so a buyer's agency agreement is it's structure for your buyer's agents. Like, if you are the team leader and you are the listing agent, as I am, it sure is nice to always know how much you're getting paid, right? And why would you not want that for your buyer's agents? Why would you want your team members to not know their value and not be able to sell their value? And so we probably had 1,000 of those agreements signed. And you know what? I can maybe think of 1 or 2 times maybe that a buyer paid us out of pocket. You know what I mean? We always accepted the commission that was offered to us, unless it was 0. And really, when it was 0, it was because the opportunity was so good. The buyer didn't mind paying us, right? And so really what's the thing about this NAR settlement where I really do see it, the rubber meeting the road in a good way, is for instance, I'm putting together, I have a deal in escrow right now. It's an off-market transaction.
Nice.
And this is that new type of short sale that I was referencing with you before we started recording, which is the new short sale, for those that may not know, is distressed home sellers that have equity. And so they don't have the cash flow to keep their, stay on top of payments. And it's devastating because they're going through a type of foreclosure. It just so happens they have equity locked up. But it's no less traumatic for them. In fact, when everyone's doing so well and their neighbors are doing well and they feel like they can't make their payments, and now they're being forced to sell because of this. And sure, they have more options than someone that was a true short seller, but in this scenario, they have to sell. And in this scenario, they have to sell quickly. And so as a representative for a distressed home seller now, and even the definition of distressed is changing because he has equity, he is in distress, okay? And now my responsibility, I would actually say my fiduciary responsibility is probably higher now with him than with an actual short seller, because the short seller didn't care because they weren't making anything anyway, right? Now, me protecting the bank's ability to come after them, certainly that's a higher fiduciary responsibility. But leaving money on the table or leaving equity on the table for these distressed home sellers is a big risk.
Yeah.
So as I negotiated, if I knew someone that would buy their home off market right away. And what I did is I referred him to my buyer's agent. This buyer, I said, listen, I'm going to stop talking now. It sounds like you're interested in this property. I represent the seller. I would encourage you to call Jillian, my buyer's agent, and ask for representation and talk to her about what that's going to look like and what that's going to cost. And then if you want to submit an offer, you need to talk to Jillian about whether or not that offer includes compensation or if you're paying Jillian out of pocket. But I'm going to negotiate my fee with the seller, and you're going to negotiate Jillian's fee with Jillian. And when I got that offer, I didn't know if the buyer was going to pay Jillian out of pocket or if my seller was going to pay it out of pocket. And it didn't matter, right?
That's funny.
Like, I don't know if an offer is going to ask for the washer and dryer, but I know how to deal with it if they do, right? It's it's just a part of the contract that always should have been a part of the conversation. And we're nervous about it, okay? It's a change. To me, this is a seatbelt law. When it happened, everyone was bitching and moaning about it and saying, you can't take away my freedom, America, and there's an eagle crying in the background. Yes, anytime you restrict us or anytime that you say things are going to operate differently, we panic a little bit. But in this situation, I negotiated my fee with the seller. It was awesome to do that and not have to worry about the buyer's agent and how that was going to affect my compensation. In fact, it gave me permission to argue for what I wanted. And I will tell you what, as this new freedom I have about this, I'm getting paid more as a listing agent because I'm not focused on what the buyer's agent's going to make. That's kind of up to the buyer's agent, right? And so I want to prepare my seller for how that plays out, right? If their house is hot and desirable, and we know that, we may not be paying a commission. And if it's under power lines and on a busy road, we might be paying commission. But it just, if you believe in the free market, why wouldn't every part of it be negotiable? And we don't want to trap consumers anyway. That's the worst, man. I remember buying my first home and I didn't know. Listen, they probably told me I was a dumb 24-year-old or something. And I probably didn't know any better. They probably told me 100 times. But when I got to the very end and I found out what my mortgage payment was going to be, it shocked me. It took my breath away. And it wasn't a lot now. Historically, it wasn't a lot. It's just way more than I expected. And no one prepared me for that. And I thought that was really bizarre and odd because this is a really big transaction. And it feels like someone should educate me. And I wasn't educated. And so I think we tried to. I think this change will only upgrade the knowledgeable agents, and it's going to make our industry better. It's going to make our industry smarter, and it's going to have people trust us more. Quite honestly, because we're going to have to talk about these things instead of just pushing a number and saying, "Oh, this is how it's always done," or you know what I mean.
Yeah, 100%. And and speaking about the transparency, I do remember times, as a, and it's not, when I was looking at property, because a few times I sometimes wouldn't, outside of Washington, I wouldn't let on that I'm an agent, right? Because I would kind of, number one, I'm not licensed in their area, so it doesn't matter. But I would kind of keep it in my back pocket, until it was relevant. That hey, by the way, I'm licensed in another state, right? And a few times, because you remember these times, right? The buyer agent would just not be transparent that they were even representing me, right? They almost wanted to come off as they were the listing agent. Hey, great, let's go. And like who are you? Are you let's sit down. Yeah. What is he going to do? What's your relationship with me and to the property? They would almost try to hide that, right? And that never left a good taste in my mouth. I'm like, is this how we always do it? Is that how people do it that way? Because they're going to get paid anyway, so just try to sneak in there and just see if they didn't notice, right? And I go, that is going away. I mean, there's no way you're going to be able to do that anymore, and I think that's a good thing. And like you said, Jesse, the professionalism of the agents that are going to thrive in this environment is going to be higher. It's going to have to be. Yeah. And I love this statistic. This is from Leo Pareja over at XP. He said last year, 67% of agents in the U.S. sold 0 properties. Which I know that number is always dramatic. It's that number even shocked even me. Like holy cow, right? Because people saying, true, yeah. Oh. 500,000 agents are going to leave the industry. Like 500,000 agents didn't sell. Almost a million agents didn't sell anything last year. Yeah. What are you talking about? They're going to leave the industry. They're not in the industry, right? They didn't sell a property in the last 12 months. So I think change is coming. Yes, change is coming. I think it's ultimately gonna benefit the consumer. Well, I'll say this: it'll benefit transparency. I think it's going to be more mixed how much it actually benefits or does not benefit the consumer or some consumers. But I think it's going to add a lot more transparency, and it's going to have to up the game of the agents. And going back to Washington State, did you see any? In your dynamic, the dynamic of your team didn't really change much at all, right? Not because you guys were always upfront about the buyer agreements and the compensation. How much you guys? That was always upfront part of your process. Did you see the sellers change at all once they because I know the listing agreement was laid out? Where like there was no longer just one box for commission and one box for share. There were like 5 boxes now, right? Did you see behavior change from the seller side when you guys implemented that potential? I want to say it laid out how the commission got paid very differently than the one I used a decade ago, right? It was more transparent. It called out a lot more different situations, a dual agency situation, or how much you want to pay. Like it made it much clearer, right? As a seller, how you could pay, and in some instances you could pay less if you wanted to, right? Did you see seller behavior change because of that, or not really in your experience the last 18 months?
Well, I mean, no, not yet. I think it's a little too early for that. I think the people that are selling or have been thinking about selling, were operating under the old model for the most part. And if you give them the option to change, they've already wrapped their head around paying a commission generally. Got it. So less so, I just didn't even bring it. Thankfully, it wasn't really part of the conversation. I mean, I brought it up on that off-market sale, that they could ask for this and they didn't. And so that's a part of the offer I need to explain. So I think it's also a little bit short-sighted because, freeing up this commission or freeing up how it's paid now allows free enterprise to have fun with it. And what I mean by that is I mean, if you're smart, you develop a new way of attracting customers, right? By fixing this commission problem. Like you could definitely develop a business model waiving a buyer's commission, right? You just have to figure it out. And so you couldn't do that before because the seller, that was something negotiated between the seller and the listing agent. The buyer's agent
Always.
had no
Would say.
involvement. But by now giving each, it gives everyone more autonomy. It gives buyer's agents more autonomy, it gives buyers more autonomy, which is good. And now I think you'll see companies fill that space. You know,
I think
people are
so.
going to get inventive and creative. That's what happens in a free market society. And so someone's going to figure out a better way of doing this, and hopefully it's one of us, right? Like,
Yeah, 100%. You know, and I think a lot of agents are just, entrepreneurial by heart. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. I think to jump into real estate, even though it's you're self-employed essentially, I think it's an entrepreneurial endeavor, 100%. So for sure, people are going to jump in and they're going to experiment, right? In ways that people might find uncomfortable. That welcome to innovation, welcome to change, right? It is uncomfortable, like that. Strap on for the ride. That's kind of that's how that should be. And I think so many other industries are built around that, right? There's way less structure in how people get paid for all the reasons you mentioned. There's a lot less structure, and real estate was very structured, right? Even though commissions have always been negotiable, that's true, but in practice, it was very structured. Let's be honest about that, right? It was just a lot of rules, a lot of people had in their heads, and I think this whole change kind of shake that up. Like, you know what? Let's let's shake it up. Let's see what happens. Let's see what happens, and I think people will adapt, right?
yeah, and I think it's a great time for this to happen. To me, it's like we're applying a new filter, right? So you got to have a little more disturbance to see what gets through. And so we should expect when things are hard, we should expect big changes like this because that's how we get out of it. That is how we recover. We don't recover by doing the same thing that got us there in the first place, right? It's changes that we have to hope for change because that's the only thing that's going to change this.
Yeah, 100%. So so I think it's interesting. So maybe the changes are yet to come, even for Washington. You're saying a lot of the changes you guys implemented on the forum side didn't really change behavior, right? Do you anticipate behavior changing now that this whole NAR thing? Even the president mentioned it, right? Like the president, like basically running on that, saying, "Hey, I lowered home prices." You can argue. I don't think that's necessarily true. but the settlement is there, right? So do you think that the change is yet to come even for Washington?
Listen, the only thing that's going to change is who's doing real estate. And so it's funny, if you look up, the average real estate agent is 60 and female. And that is going to change. And that's not a disparity, that it's not ageism, and it's not misogyny. I'm just saying that we're at a period of time, we were talking today, we're in a period of time where things are changing so rapidly that the people that didn't want to pick up social media are going to be forced to pick up AI, who are going to be forced to pick up quantum computing, and there's going to be a fall off at every level up, right?
Yeah.
And so this is a level up, and not everyone's going to make it. And so the demographic is going to change, and the industry is going to change. It's just whether or not you're going to be a stick in the mud and wither on the vine, or are you going to change and be part of the change, part of the adaptation, right?
Yeah,
Evolve or die.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I love this quote from, I think it's from Deming, saying, "Adaptation is optional. Survival is not mandatory." I love that quote. It says it in such a kind of such a like elegant way. Survival is not mandatory. Adaptation is optional. So I love it. Jesse, thank you so much, man. I appreciate your time. I know you're a busy guy. Thanks for jumping in. There's actually this for people that have been following us for a while. The second time Jesse's been on, here in the Facebook group. So Jesse, thanks for coming back. As always, open invitation to come back and talk about whatever you think is interesting that you want other real estate agents to know. So I appreciate you, man. Thanks so much.
Yeah, good to catch up.